As the chair of the German department, it is my pleasure to introduce my dear colleague, Professor Stephen Cerf. To add to the fact that he is celebrating his 40th year on the Bowdoin College faculty, I would like to mention that he is, of course, a campus legend. Generations of students and faculty members cherish him as a trusted and inspiring mentor, and they know him as a vicarious reader, an avid movie and art fan, and first and foremost, as a consummate opera lover. A born and bred New Yorker, he frequently escapes to the Met and New York Opera. Indeed, long before the Harry Potter novels taught us what it meant to operate, Steve Cerf had perfected this art of transportation and escape. A few years ago, he famously declared in the Orient's Joke edition, the Bobo Crier, quote, "Bowdoin bubble? What Bowdoin bubble? I'm piercing it. I'm going right through. I'm off to the opera." Today, Professor Cerf will not speak about opera or literature or popular culture. On the contrary, when Steve first told me about his chosen topic, hearing my grandparents' voices, their letters before deportation, he emphasized the seriousness and with a twinkle and a tear in his eye, declared it to be, quote, "heavy pizza," unquote. As a survivor child, Steve Cerf finds the Holocaust a challenging field of study, both professionally and personally. In 1978-79, he joined a self-help group of survivor children at Indiana University. Since 1984, he has regularly taught Holocaust and imaginative writing, a popular course that contributed to and cemented his reputation as a stellar teacher. He has advised honors projects on Holocaust-related topics in the Department of German and has conducted workshops throughout Maine on creative nonfiction, fiction, and film dealing with the Holocaust. Steve Cerf's publications on the Holocaust include a co-edited annotated edition of Richard von Weizsäcker's 8th of May speech, extended encyclopedic essays on Holocaust-related imaginative writers, a pedagogical article on the teaching of the Holocaust, and numerous book reviews. Professor Cerf's talk today is titled "Hearing My Grandparents' Voices, Their Letters Before Deportation." And he is dedicating this lecture to the memory of his parents, Hans and Käthe Cerf. Please join me in welcoming Steve Cerf.
Birgit, thank you for your wonderful words. Crystal, thank you. It's an honor to give this talk, and especially before this audience, which just is full of wonderful relatives, friends, and students, and I'm very grateful. Two things I've got to share with you, though. First of all, this is a brand new talk. I've been sitting on it, working on it all summer, and so during the rehearsals for it with my partner and with the department, I often have a tear in my voice and have to stop, because the letters, as sad as they are, they're also very wise and they're worth studying and hearing. But they're sad letters. So I ask you for your indulgence and your patience, because I will pick myself up and go on that proverbial horse, for the one simple reason that my grandparents' story is worth knowing and really needs to have the light of day. The other thing is you have a handout, and that has Roman numeral, it's Roman numeral 1 to 13, and a number of the key quotes that I'm going to be reading to you from the letters are there, but not all the excerpts from the letters are present. So I will announce the different Roman numerals, and so don't look in frustration on the page for something I'm reading and it's not there. I will tell you what the Roman numeral is. For me, the title of the talk, I know that you've heard it as hearing my grandparents' voices, but it's really hearing and listening to their voices, because 30 years ago, I had the incredible experience of typing out with my mother, she did most of the typing, the letters, the 35 letters. And I've been really listening to those letters for decades, but I just didn't have the courage to write about them. So I just told Crystal that as soon as I got your wonderful invitation to talk, I didn't even doubt for a minute that I would be talking about these letters. It just was festering. I just had to get it out. So I thank you for this opportunity. I heard their voices for the first time during the 1978-1979 academic year, but I've really been listening to them ever since. From the middle of the 1980s on, ever since I began to give my course on imaginative writing and the Holocaust, I've wanted to speak about my grandparents' letters to my mother, their daughter, and to my father, their son-in-law. I've wanted to view the letters within their own context and not simply as random letters. My grandparents' 35 extant letters and postcards were written over a 2-year period from the fall of 1939, just at the outset of World War II, until the fall of 1941, roughly 5 months before my grandparents' deportation to Izbica death camp on March 25th or 26th, 1942. Not a single person survived this deportation of 467 Nuremberg Jews. Their hometown was Nuremberg, and the trip was closely 900 to 1,000 miles to far eastern Poland, the Circle of Lublin, the Izbica camp. Today's Common Hour Forum finally allows me to address this deeply personal topic. You see, their writing is their heirloom. They were murdered in the spring of 1942, and I was born in New York City in 1945. You should each have a handout for this talk. The first item, Roman numeral 1, on it a picture of a group of women in front of a train freight car. Then 12 excerpts of translations from my grandparents' letters follow, Roman numerals 2 through 13. My mother must have sensed that these letters would contain her parents' last communications. Close to a year after she had fled Germany for Sweden, December 1938, together with her fiancé, my dad, she began to save these documents, intuitively sensing that they would become her parents' final testament. She had actually spoken last to her parents via telephone on February 5th, 1939, her wedding day. But as Jews, the older couple was prohibited from leaving the Third Reich, so they had to attend the wedding by phone. Nazi Nuremberg to neutral Stockholm, geographically so close, politically so distant. My closeness to my deceased grandparents, as in the case of many a survivor child, was formed right from the start. The week I was born, in October of 45, my parents got the official word of the deaths of Rosal and Jonas Ulfelder. As often in Jewish families, children are named after beloved deceased relatives. As such, my middle name, Roy, was chosen by my folks as an amalgam for the names of my grandparents. Rosie, and Jonah. It is not surprising that as a little boy in Queens, New York City, my favorite cowboy was Roy Rogers. And as a teenager, family friends likened me to my grandparents. My grandfather was a news junkie reading 5 newspapers every day, and my grandmother was an opera devotee. I too read 5 newspapers every day, and I'm addicted to opera. As transcribed, the letters from both my grandparents number 41 pages of primarily single-spaced texts. After Pearl Harbor and the official entry of the United States into World War II, December of 41, this correspondence ceased. Also, I should state that I only have my grandparents' responses to my parents' letters. I gathered up this collection of letters in 1978 and 1979 when I was on an academic year grant at Indiana University. I had received a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship to work on the novelist Thomas Mann. In the second week of September there in Bloomington, I happened to meet a close childhood friend whom I hadn't seen in 15 years. Also a Holocaust survivor child, Dan Lilly, who immediately invited me to join a group of 10 humanities and social science graduate students and postdocs who were working on projects, often together with their parents, to retrieve personal Holocaust histories. Steve, I know you. You study literature. I remember that your father was a camp survivor and that your folks fled from Nazi Germany. We meet every 2 weeks, and we will begin this Sunday afternoon. You must join. My dumb, self-lacerating response was so full of denial. I said, Dan, I cannot believe your group exists. It is a bunch of folks just feeling sorry for themselves. No, I will have nothing to do with this group, this project. Dan, a PhD psychologist, knew me. He knew me very well. He said, here is the address, here is the time we are meeting this coming Sunday. If you want to attend, come. If you don't come. Needless to say, I was the first person there. I mean, know thyself. I was the first person to show up at the psychiatric social worker's place, herself a survivor child, Bella Saffron, who has been written up extensively in the Helen Epstein book on survivor children. Wonderful, welcoming, professional psychiatric social worker. And thus began the project with my grandparents' letters. The project with my mother was so equally liberating for her as it was for me. My grandparents' letters formed a cache of letters stashed away in my mom's commodious vanity table, and specifically housed in a beautiful silken folder from Japan. Since my childhood, I had wondered about those mysterious writings, and when I was home from school with some sickness or other, I would ask my mom to read from the letters, but she demurred. She once tried reading excerpts from me because I was home for 5 weeks. I had bronchitis and pleurisy, and I was stir-crazy. I begged her to read, and she atypically broke down crying. She claimed they were too sad. Now, decades later, as part of my Indiana self-help group, and sensing their raw power, I asked my mom if we could go over the letters and type them up. She then, in her mid-60s, my current age, finally agreed to render her parents' last letters the light of day. And I want to begin our perusal of the handout with Roman numeral 1. You see a group of women and a stoutish woman in the center, with a white holder for documents around her neck.